Okay, no idea what happened, and I know we lost a lot of people watching, so my apologies, and I'll get this replay out to those that were trying to watch it. So thank you guys so much for being here. Again, I wanted to put this out and came out with the video on Friday when this first all happened with the NAR settlement. And I just think there's a lot of confusion and misinformation that's out there. There's a lot of guessing on what's actually going to happen because this settlement has not been finalized by any means. So I wanted to go through some of the misinformation, the headlines that are in the news, and then the actual facts that are out there as well. So, all right, now I think my screen should be showing. I wanted to go through some of these headlines. This is Wall Street Journal. Realtors reach settlement that will change how Americans buy and sell homes. Groundbreaking $418 million legal agreement could drive down commission rates and shrink the number of real estate agents. This one's from CNN. The 6% commission on buying or selling a home is gone after realtor associations agree to seismic settlement. Fox. National Association of Realtors settles $418 million lawsuit that will eliminate 6% commission fees. And then Fortune. The huge $418 million realtor settlement means you can find a home online without having to pay a buyer's agent commission. These things couldn't be further from the truth. And I have a hard time because I know these headlines are meant to create fear. It's called fear mongering. It creates clicks. There's a study. There's lots of studies on Facebook that show like when these things happen, you get way more engagement. But I'm going to encourage you all to take a deep breath and stop clicking. You're only fueling the algorithm. And there's so many things that you could be doing at this moment to prepare yourself better for this than really digging your heels in and going down the rabbit hole of what all this means. Because at the end of the day, I want you to remember that 4 years ago, we were at the brink of a government shutdown. We had no idea what was going to happen. And there was a lot of uncertainty. Everyone said, oh my gosh, the real estate market, if we can't show houses, we can't sell houses. And we ended up having one of the best years we've ever had. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And also, these articles, the algorithm loves when you click on them because they're going to feed you more news like that. And it's kind of like getting a new car. Once you get that new car, you start seeing more of them on the road. And you start seeing them everywhere. But one of the things I want to ask the question of is, did you know that the airlines are actually in a class action lawsuit at the moment as well? Delta and United are facing a class action lawsuit over price fixing. This isn't a headline that we see every day. This is from September, and this has been going on for years. And it's not something we see every day because we don't live in that bubble. We're not in the airline industry. The consumers aren't seeing this on a daily basis. And I get it. A lot of this stuff is happening in real time. We have folks that are, getting calls from their clients. And I recommend getting ahead of this and putting out a video. Tristan Ahumada did one that was absolutely, and I probably butchered his last name, but he did a fantastic one, kind of going over the same thing. And I recommend you go over these headlines and say, hey, this isn't the case. There were actually 19 states prior to this lawsuit that have been doing business this way with buyer-broker agreements for years, some of them since the 90s. So I don't want you to be scared of this, but you do need to be prepared for this. And so do your research. Don't believe all the headlines that you're reading, but make sure you're getting in front of the consumer so that they understand you need to be the trusted expert. And if all they're reading is what's going on CNN or Fox or whoever is all they're going to know. So I highly recommend you get in front of it. I love this one. This was one of the fears that I heard, or one of the headlines that I read. And it said buyer agency is going away. Or maybe it was on Facebook. If you are on Facebook, stay away from Real Estate Mastermind. It can absolutely consume you. There are thousands upon thousands of comments on some of these posts arguing about what's going to actually happen. And the truth is no one really knows. But I love sharing this stat because this is the annual average expenditure on lawn and garden supplies and lawn care in the United States. It was $127 billion. Okay? That's insane. We spend the last stat I saw other than this was we spend $54 billion a year on lawn care, on actually having people mow our lawns and take care of our lawns for us. So take that into account when you say buyer agency is going to go away. We're in a society when people want assistance with things. So you need to be that trusted expert and establish that with your client base and with your sphere. But I want to go into, I had posted the video on Friday, and I want to go into the actual NAR link. And you can find this, it's realtor.competition. You can find this website, and you can see litigation update. They put out a 6-minute video correcting the record. But what I really want to dig into are these last two. And they just put this one out today, the financing FAQ, so we'll cover that as well. But they're constantly coming out with new information. And again, this is very preliminary. We don't know yet what the final judgment from the DOJ is going to be, or if they're going to accept this. They did not accept the settlement on the MLS PIN case. And so I think, this may be tweaked even from what we know right now and what NAR has proposed. But jumping into that, why did NAR settle this? This is directly from NAR. So this is not anything that you're reading anywhere else. It's directly from NAR. And I think it's important that you know and understand what's in here. So since the litigation began, we've worked consistently to reach a resolution with the plaintiffs. We've always wanted to reduce the significant strain on members and provide a path forward, secure a release of liability for as many members, associations, and MLSs as we could, and preserve the choices consumers have regarding real estate services. The proposed settlement achieves both of those goals and provides a path to move forward, etc. I went to, it's called Premier Broker Summit out in California in October, November for RE/MAX, and heard how much it cost to defend it just on the RE/MAX side, and it was $24 million plus. So I can't imagine what NAR is in for, and we know that their insurance ran out last year or earlier this year. So it was time to move on from this, and there was no end in sight. So everybody's saying we shouldn't have settled, and it's like there was not really another option. This agreement would allow or would release NAR and over 1 million NAR members, all state, territorial, and local realtor associations, MLSs, brokerages owned by the NAR, and principal brokers that have residential transaction volumes under $2 billion. So that's a good thing. That means that all agents throughout the entire country are absolved of this. You're not going to have individual lawsuits that I think you saw popping up as copycat lawsuits. And the NAR fought to include members in the release and was able to ensure more than 1 million members are included. That doesn't mean that all the brokers are, and we'll get to that here in just a little bit, but I don't want to harp on that either. The agreement provides a mechanism for nearly all brokerages to enter into a settlement as well. So they kind of came up with this formula to say, hey, we're paying this, and any brokerage that did over $2 billion in volume can settle for this amount. And I think it was in here as 0.0025%. So you can go to a lot of those different websites and find out what brokerages are part of that. I think there's right around 100 of them, but I don't want to speculate on the exact number. I love this. This is throughout the document. NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing. NAR has long maintained and continue to believe that the cooperative compensation and NAR's current policies are good things that benefit buyers and sellers. They promote access to property ownership, particularly for lower and middle income buyers who can have a difficult enough time saving for a down payment with this settlement. NAR is confident in its members, and its members can still achieve those goals. Does this mean that the NAR is admitting plaintiff's allegations are true? No. I'm not going to read through every single bit of this, but the short answer is no. What if an agent has different releases under the settlement, move between brokerages? Are they covered? Release covers, again, most. I would definitely check with your brokerage, check with your legal. The one that they've specifically excluded from this because they're still holding out on the lawsuit is Home Services of America. And they're still fighting based on, I think, an arbitration clause, but that's for them to figure out. By changing the cooperative compensation policy, aren't you admitting that was problematic? Again, no. NAR throughout this document is saying, no, we didn't do anything wrong. So, is it possible for offers of compensation to be conveyed through channels other than the MLS? Yes. So, one of the things that it talked about in this settlement is that we were no longer going to be able to put commissions of compensation to buyer brokers in the MLS. But you can put it outside of the MLS. I have verified. I was on a call this morning, and they did verify that showing time is an extension of the MLS, and it would not be allowed on there. I've heard speculation of Zillow being able to put it on there, but I can't imagine they would open themselves up to that liability. They are a broker. So, yes, offers of compensation could continue to be an option consumers can pursue off MLS through negotiation and consultation with real estate professionals, and sellers can offer buyer concessions on an MLS, for example, concessions for buyer closing costs. So I believe a new field is going to be added to the MLS that says that, hey, the seller's willing to pay X amount in closing cost. Will this prohibition save money for buyers or sellers? Again, we don't think a lot's going to change on here. We don't think that the NAR has the policies that were in place increased anything. But this will make it, I think, more difficult for some first-time home buyers and VA buyers especially. They're going to have some hurdles to jump through, and we'll cover that here in just a little bit. So I'm going to scroll down to number 8 because this is the most important. The agreement would release association-owned MLSs from liability. While the release excludes MLSs that are not wholly owned by realtors, the agreement provides a mechanism for those MLSs to obtain releases. The mechanism includes opting into the MLS practice changes that are part of the agreement and paying per subscriber fee to the settlement fund. NAR has agreed to put into place a new rule prohibiting offers of compensation on the MLS. This change will go into effect mid-July 2024. That means, again, you're not going to be able to say, I'm putting X% co-op compensation on the MLS. However, you can, your company, your brokerage, can put it on their website for their listings. Additionally, we've agreed to require MLS participants working with buyers to enter into written representation agreements with their buyers. This change will also go into effect mid-July 2024. If you guys have read Tech with Ty in the past, I've been talking about this for about a year and a half. We actually made it mandatory at our brokerage February 1. So we've kind of gotten ahead of this. We made sure that our agents were prepared with the talking points, the buyer packets, because it is new. It's not normal for us. But I remember hopping on a mastermind call with a bunch of RE/MAX brokers nationwide that I talked to almost daily. And they were like, Tyler, this is not new. Again, we've been doing this since the 90s, so this is the way we do business. And it's nothing, it shouldn't feel like you're doing anything wrong by asking somebody to enter into agreement with you. And I don't think that is the feeling that I feel like a lot of agents are, what's the word? I've said feeling like 3 times, but that is what I believe agents are feeling at the moment. Hey, this is new, I don't know how to present it. But you wouldn't list a house without a written agreement. So why would you go show a complete stranger a house that could be vacant in the middle of nowhere without a written agreement and knowing who your buyer is? So how does the settlement affect home sellers and buyers? After the new rule goes into effect, listing brokers and sellers could continue to offer compensation for buyer broker services, but such offers could not be communicated via the MLS. MLS participants acting for buyers would be required to enter into the agreements. How does the settlement affect corporate brokerages? We already talked about that. Anyone over $2 billion, and there's about 100 of those companies throughout the U.S., they are not absolved of this. They need to figure out what their formula is and possibly settle, or they could still be held liable. I'm not an attorney. Please, quick disclaimer, I should have done this at the beginning, but with the technical difficulties we had, I didn't want to delay this anymore, but I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice by any means. This is my interpretation from reading this, and I encourage you to read not only the FAQ, but also the entire document. It's like 108 pages, and read through it, because one of the things that I was surprised by, and it's not outlined here, if you have an agreement, and I'm going to use ridiculous numbers here just so that it's not considered price fixing, but if you have an agreement that says that you're getting 24% commission for representing a buyer, but the listing agent is offering 38% commission, you cannot collect that additional 14%. And that is not outlined in here, but it is in that 108-page document. So I just want you to be aware that those are some of the changes and nuances your broker should be informing you of. I highly recommend that you read the document yourself so you have a better understanding of it. But how will buyer brokers get paid now? So there's a couple different ways. Fixed fee commission paid directly by consumers. So that would be your buyer paying your brokerage fee. Concession from the seller. That could be seller closing cost or a negotiation of the contract where you have a buyer broker agreement, but maybe the seller's not willing to pay all of it. And so you negotiate that, and that could be considered a discussion that you have during the entire negotiation. And then a portion of the listing broker compensation. That is kind of how we do business now throughout the entire country. Right now we list for X percent and we share some of that commission. And they're saying that's still okay as long as it is explained to the to the seller that they're not required to pay that portion of the commission to the buyer's agent. So if you say that I'm worth 20%, and I may share 10% of this with the buyer's agent, that's a discussion between you and the seller. But it needs to be that it's negotiated directly between the seller and their client and the buyer and their client. So why does the release of liability carve out some co-defendants and some of their affiliated agents? NAR fought to get everyone included, but despite their efforts, agents affiliated with Home Services of America and its related companies, the last corporate defendants still litigating the Sitzer-Burnett case, are not released under the settlement, nor are employees of the remaining corporate defendants named in the cases covered by the settlement. Plaintiffs would not agree to include these members and the employees of the corporate defendants in the NAR release, and they did, again, figure out a way to include some of these companies that are over $2 billion. NAR is paying this over 4 years, so they're working with the finance committee to figure out how that's going to look. I assume dues will possibly go up. How does the settlement change NAR's value proposition? Again, it doesn't. They continue to deliver unparalleled value and advocacy on behalf of realtors. And I do believe that the amount of lobbying they have done for FEMA, for floodplains, to make sure that those are included in their insurable homes in those floodplains, for reduced or lowered taxes or transfer taxes on properties, income tax, etc. So there's a lot of things that NAR does that agents don't see on a daily basis unless you're heavily involved with your MLS or your division of real estate. So then they get into their value proposition some more. What should listing brokers advise their clients about the prohibition of offers? Listing brokers should inform their clients that offers of compensation would no longer be an option on the MLS. This change will not prevent them from offering a compensation to a buyer's agent. And compensation would continue to be negotiable and should always be negotiated between agents and the consumers they serve. Who at NAR signed off on this was the leadership team. It was kind of a joint effort, and that leadership team has changed significantly over the past year, as you've probably seen in headlines as well. Why was prohibiting the publication of compensation offers in the MLS part of the settlement? While NAR has maintained, and we continue to believe, that cooperative compensation and the NAR's current policies are a good thing that benefit buyers and sellers, we acknowledge that continuing to litigate would have hurt members in their small business. So we agreed to put in place a new rule prohibiting that. If you guys read Tech with Ty, DOJ put out a statement of interest on the MLS PIN case, and they basically said, look, we researched this. We asked, I think State of Washington was one of the first after the Sitzer-Burnett case to require buyer broker agreements. They also were requiring the buyer broker fee be displayed on public portals so that buyers knew what their agent was making on each transaction. And they said that didn't lower commissions enough. So again, DOJ wants to see the commissions lowered. That is their they think that it has been, because of technology, it shouldn't be whatever percentage. But again, I agree here. This is consistent with NAR's long-maintained position that prohibiting all offers of compensation entirely would harm consumers and be inconsistent with real estate laws in many states that authorize them. Is it possible for offers to be conveyed through channels other than the MLS? Yes, we talked about that already. Again, some of this is repetitive. Does the settlement affect state associations? Again, your state laws take precedence, so make sure that you're following your state laws. Are institutes, societies, and councils affiliated with NAR included in the release in the settlement agreement? Yes. Do association-owned MLSs need to do anything? Yes. There's an appendix and an addendum, I believe, that needs to be filled out. How will offers of compensation be communicated if the brokers can't use MLSs? Doesn't this just make broker compensation less transparent? Okay, so they can offer, let's see, closing costs, which we talked about. does not change the ethical duties of NAR members owing to their clients. Realtors are always required to protect and promote the interest of their clients and treat all parties in the transaction honestly. They kind of jump around that question. How will offers of compensation be communicated if brokers can't use? I think you're going to have to call the listing agent, text the listing agent, email the listing agent. And again, with buyer-broker agreements, that 108-page document says that it has to happen not at the time of offer, but before they step foot in a house that you might be representing them in. So just like listing presentations, you're going to have buyer presentations where you sit down and explain that to the buyers and walk them through the process. How quickly? This is going to take a couple months. I don't know if it'll even be mid-July. I think they'll institute these rules in July, regardless of the final ruling. But they've actually extended this. I looked at this the other day, and it was not this long as the FAQ. So I'm going to kind of jump over to the financing FAQ, which just came out today, because there's been so many questions surrounding this that are unanswered. And I think, we can speculate all we want, but this document's the most important because it's, again, from the source, from the NAR. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the FHA specify limits on how much a seller or broker can contribute to the buyer to pay for services typically paid by the buyer. These payments are called interested party contributions, IPCs. So is compensation paid by the seller or listing broker to a buyer broker considered an IPC? No. The agencies exclude fees traditionally or customarily paid by the seller from the IPCs. So I know that's been a hot topic, is the seller concessions or the amount that a buyer is given. Are you going to go over those thresholds? And this is saying no, because these are traditional or customarily paid fees. Does the recently announced NAR settlement change that? Is the compensation paid by a seller or listing broker to a buyer broker now an IPC? Preserve choices for consumers that they have with all real estate services and compensation. After the new rule goes into effect, listing brokers and sellers could continue to offer compensation for buyer broker services, but such offers could not be communicated via the MLS. Based on our interpretation of current guidance, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA provide on this point, we do not expect compensation paid by seller or listing broker to a buyer broker to become an IPC. They're getting verification on this point. I have no idea what that noise was. I've never heard it on my computer before. Does the settlement change access to mortgage for buyers? No. Under the settlement, buyers still have the same options. Based on our interpretation, again, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, everything is the same. This is the big one. What about VA loans and the prohibition on buyers paying commissions? The VA has not addressed whether it will change its requirements prohibiting VA buyers from paying the commissions. NAR has engaged with the VA on this issue, and we remain committed to working with the VA so that veterans are not left out of the market or forced to consider alternative loan products. That's huge. This is what the NAR does best, and it's lobby. So lobbying Congress to make a change, to make a rule on this, I think they need to lobby everyone that they possibly can and communicate with everyone that they possibly can to make sure that VA buyers are not affected by this. As we know, VA buyers cannot pay real estate commissions. Currently, they cannot be financed. So financing commission is not feasible under the current structure of the residential mortgage finance system, and there's no clear short-term legislation or regulatory fix. Banks would treat such a loan as a personal loan that would have higher rates and would further limit access for some of these products. All right, so as noted above, IPCs don't currently affect the availability of financing, and that is not expected to change. NAR is working with our partners in the lending community to gain greater clarity on the guidance from the agencies. And I really hope the DOJ includes this in their final settlement. Like, hey, we're making changes with these institutions as well, so that we do have more clarity on it. But again, this is a lot. I know we're covering a lot in a short amount of time, but nothing here says that you can't continue doing business really the way that we've always done it. It just adds a layer of transparency so that everyone involved in the transaction knows who's getting paid by who. I think it also does this came up during a meeting that I had this morning. One of the things that one of the brokers on the call I was on said was, this allows you now that everybody's on the same level playing field of doing buyer-broker agreements, this allows buyer brokers to establish their value before just accepting what is presented on the MLS. So we see all kinds of commission rates in the MLS, but maybe, and I know there are plenty of buyer brokers out there that have taken whatever was offered as a co-op, but your value may be worth way more than what's offered. And I think this gives you the ability with a level playing field to establish that with your clients and have that conversation. So I want to go over some of the resources that are available for you to do that. And the very first one is 179 ways agents who are realtors are worth every penny of their compensation. You can download this guide. This talks about both buyers and sellers. And then you also have 105 more ways agents who are realtors are worth every penny. And again, educating the buyer, preparing the buyer, showing properties, negotiating offers. It goes through this entire checklist. Advocating for the buyer and facilitating the close. So download this guide, make it your own. This is an example of the buyer guide we put out to all of our agents. Obviously, a little bit about me, just like a listing presentation. Don't take my word for it. Here's my reviews about our company, our brokerage, what to expect from your home buying experience, understanding agency, who works for who, the advantages of a buyer agency agreement. I think that's so important. Your interests are professionally represented. Without a buyer agency agreement, you have no fiduciary responsibility to that client. They are just a customer. What every buyer should know before purchasing, reasons to buy, and then my absolute favorite, this is the process that you need to illustrate to potential buyers. Finding a realtor you can trust, analyzing their needs, making sure that they get pre-approved or pre-qualified, making sure that their credit is properly pulled. We have a huge responsibility to make sure that we are showing buyers houses that they can afford and that is comfortable for them. Selecting the properties. This isn't just setting them up on an MLS search, but hand selecting those properties for them, going through, making sure and pointing out things that we can see that maybe the buyer can't. So things that are in the agent remarks, going through the residential property disclosure. You can illustrate all of these when you're having that sit-down conversation with them. Average is 8 to 10 homes viewing properties. We've all had buyers that buy the first one that they see. We've had buyers that bought the 57th one that they see. Writing an offer to purchase. Earnest money. Earnest money is deposited into a non-interest broker's bank upon acceptance of the contract. Accept the contract. Inspections, termite, radon, house. Again, you've got to dig in and show them exactly, explain to them how this process works. And then the removal of inspection contingencies, sending the title company contract, and this varies by state, obviously just a little bit. There's escrow, etc. Completing the mortgage application, securing underwriting, obtain loan approval, doing a final walkthrough, title exam, complete title insurance, closing the property. Now you're a homeowner. So I think illustrating this and going through it thoroughly, what each of these steps means for your buyers, is super important to establish your value and show them that you're not just a glorified door opener. So how much do you want to spend? How much do you, that's continued. Getting the loan process started today. Application checklist. How much can you afford? The inspection process, the appraisal. It breaks down all these steps. So yeah, this is a great guide that we put together, and I encourage you all to do one similar. Talks about the client portal, etc. Okay, so let's talk about some of the questions and objections. I do have one question. Where the examples, please, where the buyer broker can co-op can be posted, advertised. What is forbidden? As far as right now, MLS is forbidden. Showing time is forbidden. The only place that you can possibly post it, and I did actually hear a group in Indiana today say that they got confirmation from their state legal that they could put a sign writer on the property that says X amount offered buyer broker co-op. But these are some of the talking points and questions that I think you need to be prepared to answer on the buy side. How do you get paid? I think you need to sit down with the buyer during your presentation and explain there's a multitude of different ways that I can. The agreement that you're getting ready to sign says that if the seller's unwilling to pay me, that you're responsible for the remainder of that. However, I will make sure that you are informed throughout the entire process, And if we're showing a property, you can certainly tell me take any of those off the list, but I'm not going to recommend it because we can negotiate that. Without this agreement, I can't negotiate it on your behalf. But if they're not offering any kind of compensation, I'm going to let you know ahead of time. If they're offering less, I'm going to let you know ahead of time. But again, we can negotiate that. We're going to come in with a strong offer. We're going to make sure that we're negotiating that commission to be paid on your behalf. If the seller's still unwilling to do that, you have a couple different options. Just like you do with your closing costs, just like you do with your title insurance, your home warranty, your inspections. These are all conditions of the entire process. So you have a choice to make at that point. Do you want to pay it out of pocket? Do you want to move on to the next property? It all affects the seller's net. It also affects your net. So we'll discuss that on a scenario or a case-by-case basis, but I think there's multiple options for you. So I don't want to see you eliminate a property just because you think that they're not willing to pay, because they indeed may have put it out there just saying, hey, it's negotiable, negotiate with me. Let me explain why signing a buyer agency agreement is in your interest. Again, this was written before when we made them mandatory for our company. Now they're mandatory as of July for everyone. But I think it's important to explain to them why these were required. And it's so that I have a fiduciary responsibility to you as the buyer, and I'm looking out for your best interests. What if the seller won't pay the commission? Again, that goes back up to the how you get paid. We'll negotiate that, or possibly we won't. There may be a scenario in which the seller's unwilling to budge. This has been going on in the commercial world forever. Commercial commissions are negotiated on a case-by-case basis. And there are certainly times, and the buyer can't expect you to work for free, but there are times where you may need to increase the offer price. For the last 4 years, we've seen offer prices, $50,000 to $100,000 over list price in some markets. Still seeing some over list price today. I love this one. I have an agent who will do it cheaper. I'm sure you do. Just like I'm sure you've been on listings where you're going up against an agent that may cut their commission. All you can say is, I'm not sure what that other agent does for the percentage that they have quoted you, but here's how I operate. And then again, go through that buyer guide with them. Again, establishing your value throughout this process is going to be crucial. And I think, no longer are the days where you're going to have to jump to go show an internet lead that you received, because there were 120 million internet leads for real estate last year and only 4 million homes sold. So chances are those buyers were on 8 different websites and calling every agent that they were getting connected with via Zillow or Realtor.com or whoever. And I think it's important that this is a good change, in my opinion, for the entire industry, from a safety perspective, but also from a experience perspective. I think this will eliminate a lot of the weak agents. We have, in my opinion, too many part-time agents that are hurting the reputation. That's apparent when you look at the statistics that say that 50% of agents last year didn't sell a house within the first 6 months or whatever it was. Don't quote me on those stats. It was somewhere around there. Seller side, why do I have to pay the buyer's commission? Again, you don't. And it's your choice if you want to represent them if they don't want to pay that buyer commission, because it does affect the marketability of the home. If they're unwilling to pay that commission for a VA buyer, that buyer's agent is not going to work for free. And I think especially in our market in Dayton, Ohio, we have a ton of VA buyers. So I think you need to have the conversation. Do you want to successfully eliminate VA buyers that can't pay a commission to their buyer's agent? FHA buyers who may have a lower down payment, or even conventional buyers with only 5% down, because they may not have the money to bring out of pocket for closing costs, inspections, tax prorations, all the different things, the funding of escrow, all the different things that add up to the cost of home ownership. I'm only willing to pay the buyer's agent X. Again, that is exactly what I just said. It's negotiable, and you have to decide as an agent what that commission rate is for you. What it is for I think it's a conversation you have with the seller on. Again, you may be eliminating potential buyers from purchasing your property. We've seen this flux of new home construction over the past X amount of years. When the market's hot and things are flying off the shelves, home builders are only offering $2,000 or whatever percent. When the market gets slow, they start offering way more percentage in commission and offering cruises as bonuses and all this other garbage. So yeah, you're going to have that conversation with your seller to say, hey, I want you to understand if they're comparing apples to apples. And let's consider that your house is being compared against new construction. That construction company is offering X percentage and also a rate buy down. How do you think it's going to feel comparing your house where you're not willing to pay that commission? They have to bring it out of pocket and pay full price on the rate. I think that's a valid conversation that needs to be had. And what is the benefit to me agreeing to pay the buyer's agent commission and yours? Those are two very separate things, and it depends on how your listing contract is worded. If it's you sharing the commission, I think you've got to make that explanation. Here's why I'm sharing X amount of my commission with a buyer's agent, because I want to market your home to the most amount of buyers possible. If you are not displaying it that way, and it is that the seller's paying the buyer's agent directly, I believe that you need to explain, here's what I do for my commission, just like you have with every listing presentation you've ever done. Here's what I do for X percent commission to market your home. Photos, 3D tours, video, yada, yada, yada. I'm also seeing a lot of agents that are breaking this down on both sides to say, I'm going to offer a menu of services. It doesn't have to be X percent every time. It could be that for X percent, I'm available 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. For Y percent, I'm available nights on the weekdays. And for Z, I'm available nights, weekends, 24/7. I'm your concierge agent. And I think that works for both buyers and sellers. So who's getting the money? Homeowner who has sold and paid the 6%. That's an agreement. It depends on the listing contract whether or not the agent is sharing that money or it's paid directly to the buyer. That's going to be outlined, I believe, in your listing agreement because these are going to change. But let's say that you're sharing and that buyer broker comes in with a lower commission than you're offering. That's a savings for the seller if it's split, but not necessarily if you're sharing. So I would advise you to talk to your broker on that as well, or to your legal counsel. One of the other things, and I love this slide, it is a little in your face, and again, this is not legal advice. This was another RE/MAX broker who's also an attorney that posted this on Facebook. But one of the things that I think is going to be changed in the listing contract is this disclosure. It said that it had to be conspicuously displayed. So attention, sellers are not required to offer compensation to the buyer's agent. The choice is yours. So shout out to Keith Pike. You posted this, and I love the thought behind it. Not necessarily something I'm going to be using, but I love the thought behind it. So the choice is yours. Select an option below. Yes, I want to offer appropriate compensation to the buyer's agent so they will bring attention to the most amount of buyers to show my property and giving my property the best chance of selling at the highest price in the least amount of time by exposing my property to the most amount of people. Or no, I want to possibly exclude thousands of potential buyers from seeing my property by excluding buyer's agents who are unwilling to work for free or who have buyers that are unable to pay the buyer's agent fee out of their own pocket, resulting in less exposure for my property. So, love that. And I assume that this is going to be displayed, maybe toned down just a little bit, in a lot of the listing contracts. So I think it needs to be clear that these are the two talking points for agents when a seller is unwilling to do that. So that is, I flew through that because we were about 10 minutes behind, but I do want to open it up for any Q&A that you guys might have. And I'm going to try to open this up on Facebook. I don't know if the stream's even going on there, but I'm going to open this up on Facebook to see if I can see any questions we might have on there. Hopefully Abby shared this. If not, you can certainly always add your questions in the comments on YouTube. All right, I know there's a slight delay, so I'm going to give this just another minute or two. And again, thank you guys so much for joining. All right. Be honest, are you excited about the opportunities coming this summer? 100%. I think there are going to be a ton of opportunities for agents that are prepared for this. So, yes. I think you need to be well versed on establishing your value and articulating that to the consumer. So, again, don't be scared. Don't read the clickbait, fear mongering headlines. Be prepared and establish your value. So, if the homeowner paid 3% to the listing agent and 3% of the buyer agent, how would that work? Obviously, that's a hypothetical. I'm not going to get into the actual commission. But according to NAR's guidelines that we went over earlier, that is absolutely fine. It is not an IPC, so it would be displayed and would not go towards the contribution limits. And actually, Rob Hahn put out an article when this all started, or actually he did a YouTube video, and DOJ actually put out in their statement of interest, they referenced his YouTube video where he says the ALTA is going to look the same. The HUD statement's going to look the same. So I thought it was funny that the DOJ referenced that it's not going to look really any different on the actual closing statement to the consumer. It's just up front, they want that transparency. All right, I'll give it another 20, 30 seconds. See where we're at on the... There's a huge lag between live and what's showing on my screen. So another 10, 20 seconds, and I'm going to hop off here and head to the next appointment. Hi, it's Andrea. How else can we show agents are going to compensate? Can it be in showing time? No, my call was on this morning and said that they talked to the state legal department, and they said no, that's an extension of the MLS. So I don't think you're going to be able to do that. I even had agents ask, what if because you can add additional documents and attach stuff in showing time now, like automatically send disclosures. You're not going to be able to do that. And I had agents ask, can we upload a document in the MLS on what they're offering for compensation? And the answer was no. So I think you're going to have to make sure that it's published on your personal website. I think agents are going to have to call listing agents to find out what the offer of compensation is. But again, it's not going to be as important as establishing your value with the buyer before you go out showing them properties and knowing that you're getting what you're truly worth. But having the conversation with them is important of this property is not necessarily offering the full amount that I'm requesting. And I believe there will be addendums that come with those. I don't recommend, again, you cannot offer a low compensation for your buyer broker agreement and then go up to whatever the listing agent's offering. So I'm not going to recommend that you start low because you can't go high, but you can always start high and go low on a particular property. So an addendum would be filled out for, I know that's, I think, being discussed in my local MLS. An addendum could be added to the buyer broker agreement that maybe would exclude, let's say there's a particular scenario where you're real close on the numbers that a buyer needs to bring to the table, and they can't necessarily afford all of it. And you say, you know what, I'll knock off whatever amount, but it's specific to that property because we all know that those properties can fall through, and you maybe don't want that to be the norm going forward. But a sign writer would be acceptable, yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to, again, transparency, because the MLS is a private club and the consumer can't see what's being offered, so they want it to be public so that the public knows what is being offered. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have additional questions, put them in the comments, and I will reach out to you personally with any answers that I might have. But yeah, we'll keep doing these and this may not be the platform because this was a complete nightmare. I've got a giant screen that's about this wide with like 8 different windows up trying to change everything. maybe I'll just get better at using the software next time. But I appreciate your guys' patience, and thank you so much for joining, and we will see you on the next